asked to abolish ICE as protests erupt across the nation.
These folks are going to walk in the streets today to make that point. Look at ICE. What a group of incompetents.
You get rid of ICE, you're going to have a country that you're going to be afraid to walk out of your house.
Barack Obama making a bold prediction for Nancy Pelosi. She, quote, will once again be one of the greatest speakers we ever had.
If he's campaigning for Nancy Pelosi, that means he don't have a clue.
I think it's time for an entire new generation of leadership in the Democratic Party. We are literally in the worst position as a party since the 1920s.
I am not about to let this country go by the way of Donald Trump. Today I say impeach 45.
I hope they keep thinking about it because they're going to get beaten so badly.
We're screaming out, we can be heroes everywhere we go and have all that we ever wanted. Swinging like Ali,
This show is truly unstoppable, especially when you got Superman on the couch.
It's true.
Hey, brings it to another level.
Happy July 1st.
Yeah.
Can't believe we're in July. Time just flies. I feel like the older you get, the faster time goes by. Is that a thing?
Well, let me tell you,
You're not very old.
But I feel like the older I'm getting, the more anxiety I'm like, well, you know what, time just, maybe it's because of having a daughter, you realize she's getting older so quickly, she's going to be in college before you know it.
College? She's
I feel like it.
my boy just graduated high school. I know what you're talking about.
See?
This is where you'll be in 5 years.
I know. I was
She'll be in college before you die.
rocking her to bed the other night, and I actually started getting emotional. And I was like, I'm not going to be able to do this that much longer. Or she'll just let me hold her and put her to sleep.
Maybe she will. I still kiss my kid on the neck because he's taller than me. But
Your poor son's like, Dad, stop.
yeah, sorry, buddy. I don't mean
Not
to
in
throw you
public.
under the bus right here. He does, but he's sweet.
He's a sweet boy, and he just graduated.
Graduated from high school.
school.
Gonna take a gap year and hang out with me. Yes.
That is a great year.
Yes, I think so. I'm
Who doesn't
looking
want
forward
to
to
No
it.
better education.
Yeah.
Side by side with Dean
True.
Cain.
That's right.
Good morning to all of you. Happy July 1st. And of course, it is the week of the 4th of July. So we are celebrating freedom today on this show and all week long. But as always, there is a lot of news to get to. Our own Maria Bartiromo is joining us later on this hour. She had a one-on-one exclusive interview with President Trump, and she talked about a number of things. And one
During
of those.
a big week, by the way.
Yeah, very.
Think about how it started. So you've got a series of Supreme Court decisions that go the president's way on the travel ban, on the union dues that Democrats are no longer going to be able to grab, and then you have Justice Kennedy stepping down.
Surprise.
The president's going to reshape the court. And on Friday, he does this interview because
You also have the Russia summit coming up that was
Russia
announced a
summit
couple days
coming
ago.
up.
It just keeps rolling.
Tax cuts 6-month anniversary. The economy is going strong. And oh, by the way, Democrats are kind of stepping in this issue of let's abolish ICE, which started as a socialist idea, basically, and is now going mainstream, where the center of their party is saying, yeah, let's do this. Senators like Kirsten Gillibrand, in a race for 2020, are going a race to the left, basically.
Yeah.
Dick Durbin saying what he said, the number 2 Senate Democrat. It's shocking.
That ICE is basically incompetent. As you said, he is one of the leading Democrats in the Senate. So Maria Bartiromo in that interview also asked about immigration, because that has been such a focus of the conversation recently. Asked him about that and asked about the Democrats and what they've been saying about ICE. And here's what he said.
The 28-year-old socialist that just beat out Joe Crowley says abolish ICE. And get this, more Democrats are getting in line with that. Kirsten Gillibrand today saying we need to abolish ICE.
Well, I hope they keep thinking about it because they're going to get beaten so badly. Do you know, ICE, these are the guys that go in and take MS-13 and they take them out because they're much tougher than MS-13, like by a factor of 10. And these are the ones, you get rid of ICE, you're going to have a country that you're going to be afraid to walk out of your house. I love that issue if they're going to actually do that.
So the president's basically saying, bring it on. If you want to make this an issue in the midterms, and the idea that, say, Republicans would like to abolish the IRS because they want to bring taxes down, and you want to abolish ICE because you want open borders, he's willing to have that fight.
By all means, go out there and talk about this, because he feels this could be a winning issue for the Republicans.
If you weigh those two, I think he's going to win on that one. That's no question.
It's an interesting debate to have. So yesterday, there were protests across the country. Had thousands of people coming out, including a number of celebrities, some of your friends out in Hollywood, Dean.
Yes.
The same celebs that we've seen, they came out during the Women's March. And look, protests are great in this country if you're fighting for something you believe in. And there was a lot of talk about love and bringing people together,
which is great.
But you also, as you mentioned, had Dick Durbin, who had some pretty cruel things to say about ICE. Here is some of that yesterday.
Our democracy is at stake. Our humanity is at stake.
We don't see our brothers and sisters who come to America for a better life as animals
or thugs.
All live in the same house, not just the American house, but the world house. There is no such thing as an illegal human being.
We need to rebuild our immigration system from top to bottom, starting by replacing ICE with something that reflects our morality.
Look at ICE. What a group of incompetents. At this point, they're focused more on toddlers than terrorists. It's time to put an end to this cruel and incompetent policy.
So think about it. You could plug in the issue, whether it was the gun control rallies, now it's immigration. Started out as a women's march with Madonna months and months ago saying, let's go blow up the White House, basically. And so it's playing into the president's hands, perhaps, in a way, because when you listen to John Legend, one of the things he said, our brethren are not animals. Well, who did the president call animals? MS-13 gangs, who literally carve kids up. He wasn't talking about children at the border. He was talking about gang members.
But it just
that's who Democrats are aligning with.
It always gets conflated in all the different words. It's conflated to be everything that's anti-Trump.
But you're right. You're exactly right, Dean, because the anger that you see in these protests is not necessarily even about ICE. The original anger, the root of it, is with President Trump. And that is who they are upset with. If you are mad about our immigration system, by the way, you got to be mad at our lawmakers.
That's the one to
do something about it.
And both sides of the aisle, because it has been decades where they have had an opportunity to come to the table and maybe negotiate things from both sides that they want to get something real done.
Sure.
They have yet to do that.
Which makes it so weird to see congressmen and senators and people going, we've got to do something. You guys are the ones who were supposed to do it.
And now it's ICE's fault. Now you have these lawmakers saying ICE is to blame. Forget us doing our job. Let's blame the people that protect us.
Dick Durbin said. He said that these folks at ICE are incompetents. These are federal agents doing their jobs to
putting their
try
lives
and
on
protect
the
all
line
of us.
every single day.
And they're incompetent?
It's a horrible thing to say. It's absolutely
I would love to have Dick Durbin on this couch across from some of the folks that work in ICE that we've had on the show and say that very thing to their face.
I've got another idea. Put him on one side of the couch, and on the other side of the couch, put someone like Courtney Hacking. She lost 2 kids and her husband in a car crash caused, yes, by an illegal immigrant. Listen to her story.
Everybody wants to talk about the families being separated from illegal immigration, and that's the hot topic. But what they don't think about is that we are in America, and every day parents are separated from their children permanently by actions that are often caused by those very people who are here illegally to begin with. It saddens me that their stories aren't getting told.
Well, we're willing to tell those stories.
Why aren't we protesting that? Why aren't people even more fired up about those innocent lives that have been lost? I spoke to her months ago on this show. What a story she has to tell. She lost much of her family. She's inspiring. She's very strong when she talks about immigration. And it's an important, I think, angle to the conversation that does not get enough attention.
It doesn't fit the narrative.
Also, people have to understand, Border Patrol is the one who is getting the people as they're coming across the border. It's not ICE. They're protesting the wrong group.
Right. ICE is dealing with the people who are already here, some illegal, and they're trying to get the illegals out of the country. What's wrong with that?
That's their job.
To enforce the law. But don't tell that to Maxine Waters. Because she looks at this situation and just doubles, triples down. And remember there were Democratic leaders a couple weeks ago before some of this incivility back and forth who were saying, Maxine should calm down with the impeach 45 talk.
Did she listen?
She is back with a vengeance. And yesterday, again, stated to be an immigration rally, turned it into an anti-Trump rant. And rather than trying to turn the temperature down, she just
amped it right up.
To 11.
Now, we have some members of Congress who are intimidated. I have no fear. I'm in this fight. And I know that there are those who are talking about censuring me, talking about kicking me out of Congress, talking about shooting me, talking about hanging me. All I have to say is this. If you shoot me, you better shoot straight. There's nothing like a wounded animal. I am not about to let this country go by the way of Donald Trump. We are sick and tired of him. He's been there too long. They dare me to say impeach him. Today I say impeach 45.
I hope and pray that she no longer gets death threats. No member of Congress,
No, nobody should
person in
ever.
this country
No.
should face that kind of threat of violence. But if it's true that people are threatening to hang her, threatening to shoot her, to then say, you better shoot straight, and like almost egging it on. Let's
Stirring the pot.
turn this down.
Got
Why-
to
why
dial
amp
it
up?
back. No, I think it's that language that is why we are where we are today. She says President Trump has been in too long. I think he's been in a year and 3 months.
Yeah, that's-
She's been talking about impeaching him from the very
By
beginning.
the way, you
though.
know who needs to talk to her directly, and he's done it on this program, is Steve Scalise. It was barely a year
Oh, my
ago
gosh.
that he was shot by a supporter of Bernie Sanders. Not necessarily Bernie Sanders' fault. This is somebody who just supported him, who was amped up and said, I'm targeting Republican members of Congress. And he was shot and nearly killed. And she's talking about shootings? Come on.
Yeah, it's bad. And yeah, they were on the Southern Poverty Law Center's hate group. You know, that's why they came in there. Like, they come over here, we're going to get this guy. It's just the wrong way to go. Tamp it down, please.
Both sides. Everyone just needs to calm down. We can have debates in the country, but that talk, it gets us
How long
nowhere.
has she been in Congress? How has she helped to move the immigration reform debate forward? Focus on that.
Longer than a year and 3 months?
Yeah, think so.
Maybe.
All right, we do have some other headlines I want to bring you this morning. Starting on a very serious note, 9 people have been brutally stabbed in an apartment complex overnight in Boise, Idaho. Many of the victims are feared to be refugees, including several children. 4 are in critical condition at this very hour. The 30-year-old suspect, Timmy Kinner, was quickly taken into custody. You can see him right there. No motive has yet been determined. We'll keep a close eye on this story. Also, this Republican Michael Cloud wins a Texas congressional special election by a landslide. Cloud avoiding a runoff in Saturday's race, earning 55% of the vote in a crowded field. He will finish the term of Blake Farenthold, who resigned over sexual misconduct accusations. The term expires in January. Cloud says that he will run again in November.
Quick turnaround there.
That is one. All right, well, recreational marijuana now legal in 2 East Coast states today. In Massachusetts, customers 21 and over can buy pot at licensed stores. In Vermont, the rules are a little more strict. Marijuana users are allowed to have up to 1 ounce, but can only smoke in private places. There is also no legal market for marijuana in Vermont. Huh.
Here we go.
Hey, where are you going to find that then?
Yeah. California.
Exactly. Or Utah. Or, no, not Utah.
Not
Colorado.
Utah.
Colorado. I apologize.
Several Democrats, meanwhile, as we said, rallying to abolish ICE. But is this really a winning message for Democrats heading into the midterms? We're going to ask a Democratic pollster who's not so sure next.
And he was a guest on this show so many times. Master Sergeant Mark Evans started an incredible program sending a slice of home to our troops. He sadly passed away last year, but his son is now keeping the Pizza for Patriots mission alive. He joins us live coming up.
System from top to bottom, starting by replacing ICE with something that reflects our morality and that works.
A number of Democratic lawmakers are calling for ICE to be abolished, but many Americans are wondering, how can the country stay safe without the agency? And is this a winning message for Democrats in the 2018 midterms? Let's ask a Democratic pollster. Celinda Lake, good morning. Nice to see you.
Good morning.
So
nice to be here.
It's wonderful to have you, and I wonder, what do you think, as a longtime Democratic pollster, I've known you and know your insights to be sound. The Democrats are more and more saying, hey, this is a great idea. Let's abolish ICE. And the president is basically saying, bring it on, because he thinks it's a terrible idea.
Well, what we're saying is that this is an agency run completely amok that needs complete reform with standards, accountability, and training, and as Elizabeth Warren said, needs to be redone from the ground up. That said, Democrats also have to reassure people that we understand there's a need for internal security, and we have that. We have that with the FBI and the Department of Justice. We have it with the State Department consulate that vets people before they even get here. We have it with border control. We have it with local law enforcement. ICE is not contributing to internal security. ICE is contributing to a disaster in our country that doesn't reflect our values, and they break the laws as much as they enforce them.
Whoa, hang on a second. That's a pretty strong statement. What evidence do you have, first of all, that ICE breaks the law?
It's against the law in this country to separate children from their mothers. We've never had that policy.
Well,
look
the
at
White House disagrees with you and says that the existing law allows for it. Previous presidents in both parties did not enforce that part of the law because they figured it was going to blow up in their face like it did for this White House. But they're saying the opposite. The law says the opposite of what you're saying.
Donald Trump has broken so many immigration laws, immigration policies, and immigration and refugee treaties that his saying that something is legal is a joke, and the courts continually turn back on him.
Okay, well, obviously he would deny that he's breaking the law. He's trying to enforce the law, but I don't want to get sidetracked on that back and forth. But I do want to quote you. You told Axios, quote, "I worry that abolishing ICE tips the issues from humane treatment," which we've seen in recent days, the fight, to security. The Republicans are already trying to move the issue in that direction. Voters believe we need some enforcement of border security, not just for immigration, but for security. I wish we were pushing this to, we need comprehensive immigration reform. I got to say respectfully, that is not what top Democrats like, say, a Kamala Harris or Kirsten Gillibrand in New York, who want to run for president, are doing. They are not saying, let's reform things, like you said a moment ago, in fairness. They are saying, abolish ICE, and Dick Durbin is saying they're full of incompetence.
Well, I think Dick Durbin's comment was taken out of context. And of course, ICE, as you said earlier in the program, doesn't do the border security. ICE does internal immigration policy. That said, it's a very legitimate question that you're raising and that the public's going to raise. What are we doing about security? And I think we need to couple our answer on abolishing ICE, which is a very legitimate policy. It's needed reform. That people have called for reform for a long time, including redoing it as an independent agency, putting it in together with other agencies. But we need to couple that with a security response.
So pardon me,
leave that question
it
open.
sounds to me like you're getting at something very important, which it seems to me that you may be pointing the Democratic Party the idea that this running out and saying let's abolish ICE does not make a lot of sense, either literally or politically. And so you're trying to drive the conversation in your party to, how do we have security and reasonable reform of ICE and other agencies? That, and correct me if I'm wrong in characterizing it, but that seems a lot more reasonable than senators coming out and saying, let's get rid of this agency that protects us.
Well, this agency doesn't protect us. It's been running amok for a long time, and it's very understandable after this last crisis why people want to abolish it. I think people have sincere questions about whether it can be reformed, but I do think what we need to do is head toward comprehensive immigration reform and couple our call for abolishing ICE with our reaffirmation of what we need for security internally.
I got it, but the outstanding question, I don't have time, but is how are you going to have that security you're talking about without an agency like ICE? Maybe they'll be reformed and somebody new to come in. We will see in the days ahead. Linda Lake, thanks for your insights.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Okay, former President Obama, meanwhile, backing Nancy Pelosi's potential return to Speaker. Dan Bongino says no way he's fired.
Us at the Quicken Loans National.
Been a very patient day for Molinari. He just left edge, maybe.
And that is a birdie finish.
Boom. Francesco Molinari tied for the lead at 13 under with Abraham Ancer. Tiger Woods off to a good start, but now he's 6 shots back entering today's final round. And 3 of the NBA's top stars already making their moves within the first few hours of free agency. I'm interested in this. Paul George going back to Oklahoma City. Chris Paul also staying put in Houston after a long playoff run. And Kevin Durant staying with Golden State after winning another NBA title. The biggest free agent of them all, Mr. LeBron James, has yet to make his decision. We know he's
a snub of him, though, that Paul George might have gone to the Lakers with LeBron. Staying in OKC means that maybe LeBron has to go back to Cleveland. Nobody wants to play with him.
Listen, LeBron's he's hanging out in the Caribbean trying to make a decision.
King James.
It's a tough life.
He's in the
tough
Caribbean
place to
and
be.
He's got a lot of money. He's all right.
All right. Well, calls to abolish ICE taking center stage as a Democratic rally cry.
We need to rebuild our immigration system from top to bottom, starting by replacing ICE.
Look at ICE. What a group of incompetents. At this point, they're focused more on toddlers than terrorists.
But our next guest warns there's a great danger to this message. Dan Bongino is a former Secret Service agent, former NYPD officer. He joins us now to explain it. And just to follow up on the segment we just had with Democratic pollster Celinda Lake, I have great respect for her, so I don't want to trash her after she's on. But it seemed to me she was trying, if you heard it, to have it both ways and say, we need to abolish ICE, but Democrats need to find a better message where they're talking about security and not abolishing ICE. But abolishing ICE is a good idea, and we don't really know what's going to replace it. It doesn't really seem to make sense. What are you going to do to protect the country?
Yeah, I mean, calls to abolish ICE, Ed, will lead to the abolishment of the Democrat Party. I mean, this has been, Ed, you and I have had this conversation on the show before. This is the gift of Donald Trump. I sincerely mean this. He has this unique ability to provoke a political overreaction by the Democrats. Now, I want to be clear on this. Not an ideological overreaction. This is who the Democrats have been for 20 years, folks. Make no mistake. They've been about open borders. They've been about high taxes, big government, government-controlled health care. This is who the Democrats are. They've just been really good at politically hiding it and making themselves look like a more moderate party. The gift of Trump has been to provoke a political overreaction where their political tactics have gone out the window and they're competing with each other for who can have the most fringe radical position to see more anti-Trump. Yeah. And that's where this outrageous abolish ICE position comes from. This will not resonate anywhere outside of the coast.
Well, Dick Durbin is joining that list. One of the leading Democrats on the Hill calls the complete agency of ICE, he calls them incompetent. What worries me, Dan, is the morale. I mean, you look at these folks that sign up to serve this country, serving as Border Patrol agents, serving with ICE. They give their life to help protect this country. They are doing what is being told from the very top. And the way they're being treated right now, the way they're being talked about, I think that is something that we should all stand up and say, we should not stand for this.
You know, Abby, when I was a Secret Service agent, it was back then it was INS and U.S. Customs. And I can tell you with a pure heart that they were some of the best agents I'd ever worked with, federal agents and officers of the government. If you needed help in tracking down someone who was here and had committed a crime, let's say it was a crime the Secret Service had purview over, counterfeiting, credit card fraud, and they happened to be in the country illegally, there was no better group of people to go to. They were terrific. And to talk about them as if there's some kind of a drain on our society, to make comparisons to a terrorist group. I mean, again, this isn't a fringe position. This is a fringe of a fringe position that should be renounced by anyone looking to maintain political credibility or a heart for that matter.
Yeah, that certainly hurts those law enforcement agents to hear them spoken about in those terms. It's shocking. But Dan, President Obama, former President Obama, he backs Nancy Pelosi's potential return to Speaker, as new polls show that her favorability ratings fall to a 9-year low among Democrats. What do you say to that?
You know, I'm going to shock you all a bit. Obama's right. Listen, Nancy Pelosi's a blessing and a curse, right? The blessing with Nancy Pelosi for the Democrats, not for us, is she's great at whipping votes. She just is. The Obamacare, the massive expansion of government, the stimulus under Obama, you can thank Nancy Pelosi. It's not surprising Obama would want her back. The curse part for the Democrats with Nancy Pelosi is she simply cannot keep her foot out of her mouth. The crumbs comments, she says things that are utterly ridiculous and politically hurt the Democrats at the same time. But I completely understand why Barack Obama would want a political tactician like her back in that position. She's really good at whipping votes and keeping them in line. I mean, look, the tax cut plan, guys. There was not one Democrat vote. The Republicans can't even seem to agree on cutting government spending outside of the Freedom Caucus. So she does her job well. She just says sometimes things that are, you know, really not that great for a party.
And she doesn't always read the reports either with healthcare. It's like, well, let's vote on it, and then we'll read what's actually in it to better understand it.
Right, afterwards. Right. And then she'll talk about crumbs later on, which really doesn't do the party any good.
All right, Dan Bongino, appreciate you coming in, buddy.
Dan Bongino. Good to see you.
You got it, guys.
Thank you, Dan. All right. Well, many people looking to the appointment of Supreme Court Justice Anthony Kennedy's successor to address abortion. But during this past term, there have been a number of Supreme Court cases involving religion. So how does the high court handle that topic? Our religion panel is here to weigh in on that next.
That'll be interesting. Plus, a vacation turns deadly. A tour boat with Americans on it erupting into flames in the Bahamas.
Government plans, and Democrats immediately focused on what that means for Roe v. Wade.
Women's access to safe legal abortions on the line.
This is a line that's been drawn about whether we are going to criminalize women, whether we are going to be arresting women for making decisions about their bodies.
During this past term, the Supreme Court dealt with many issues involving religion and religious freedom, including the president's travel ban, then a case involving prayer during county meetings. And the High Court also ruled that a Christian baker did not have to bake a cake for a same-sex wedding. Here to weigh in on those cases and what we might see in the future and involving religious freedom, we turn to our religion panel. Dr. Zuhdi Jasser, president of the American Islamic Forum for Democracy; Norman Fried, a professor of Jewish Studies at Columbia University; Father Jonathan Morris, a Fox News religion contributor, of course; and Lila Rose, president of Live Action. I want to start with you, Father Jonathan. What do you think when you see some Democrats immediately saying, before the president's picked anyone, this notion that all of a sudden women are going to be thrown in jail, they're being criminalized over their bodies?
Well, I mean, obviously, I think that's an exaggeration, but I think they should be afraid of a change in the Supreme Court if they are for abortion, because we know, I think, on both sides that Roe v. Wade was just bad constitutional law on the one hand, and secondly, that especially among younger generations, the tide has shifted away from seeing that abortion is just a medical procedure. We now very clearly through sonograms know that this is a baby. So I think they're understandably afraid.
Zuhdi, I want to talk to you about the travel ban, because the Supreme Court ruled that there was not bias against Muslims. The president had started out talking about wanting to crack down on radical Islam, as you know, but it went through 3 different iterations. And by the end, it was actually a small fraction of Muslims around the world that were targeted, and the court ended up siding with him. What's the significance?
Well, I think the significance is, thank God the dissenting opinions weren't the majority. I mean, you read that, and it was really a testimony to activist judiciary. And in fact, thankfully, the majority proved that the president will be held accountable to the rule of law and what he writes in his executive orders, rather than a few comments that he might make on the campaign trail. And it makes me fearful for, what could have happened had we not had a President Trump picking conservative judges that will adhere to the original intent of the Constitution, which is to hold to the rule of law rather than to have activist judges, because Ed, it's irrational that a president would prohibit travel from certain countries that might be Muslim majorities, and we basically in a collectivist identity politics say, oh, that's anti-Muslim, when in fact as a Muslim I'll tell you there's nothing more pro-Muslim than preventing terror groups, than preventing folks that are Islamists with ideologies that would be antithetical to being American from coming in. So to identify that as being anti-religious, that somehow an entire country becomes identified with its religious identity is absurd, when yet 50 Muslim countries weren't even on that list.
Professor Fried, under the radar, the court, it didn't get as much attention as some of the other cases. They declined to take a case about prayer at meetings, keeping a lower court ruling that it's unconstitutional. But can't you also pray, obviously, to a higher power? You do it on your own.
That's a wonderful question, and we understand that the closest fidelity to the Constitution is separation of church and state, God in government. But as a trauma therapist and as a teacher of religion and Jewish religion in particular, we all know that this is a world that's filled with tremendous trauma. And I see folks who are traumatized on a daily basis. We watch the news and we see so much in the world that requires a faith in a higher power. It does not necessarily matter what we call that faith, that power, whether it's the God of Moses and Abraham or Jesus or Muhammad or Buddha. What's important is that we recognize that we are not alone in this universe, and that we heal better when we have faith in something that can take us to a better place.
Lila, what do you think about the Christian baker case, saying basically the baker does not have to bake a cake for a gay wedding? The baker was saying, I'm not discriminating against homosexuals. They can come in, they can shop, they can buy things, but I don't want to design a cake for a gay wedding because I'm personally opposed.
I think the court was right to protect the baker Jack Phillips' freedom, his religious belief that marriage is between a man and a woman. I mean, that's a belief that's held dearly. It's natural marriage by major world religions, and it's something that Jack was brave to say, I'm not going to use my artistry as a cake maker to design a custom wedding cake for a ceremony that I do not agree with because of my religion and because of what I believe about natural marriage. So I think the court did the right thing to protect him against the bullying that he experienced by the Colorado Civil Rights Commission.
Father Jonathan, how do you balance that as a Catholic leader? I mean, obviously, I'm Catholic, and we hear on immigration, for example, the church wants to be welcoming to people. I assume the church also wants to enforce the laws in this country. In the case of the baker, you want people to have religious freedom, but you also don't want people in this country to feel that they're being discriminated against. That would not be the Christian way either.
I think it's always a balance. Like you said, they're not easy issues, but I think a very simple principle is that we do not want to be imposing, as a country, imposing our religion on another, on anyone, imposing a religious belief or practice on another. That's what the Constitution says. That's what the separation of church and state is. But religious freedom means that we have to allow other people to live it. And that is sometimes uncomfortable, but that's what our Constitution, that's what's made really the American experiment as wonderful and as beautiful as it is. We do not impose religion. We do not establish one religion over the other, but we allow people to live freely.
Zuhdi, your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I mean, religious liberty is what makes America what we are, and why I think we have a much stronger position against radical Islam and all the other infiltrations. The left's hypocrisy of using Muslims as a minority for identity politics and then rejecting that first freedom of religious liberty when it applies to conservatives, I think exposes their hypocrisy and rejects the Founding Fathers' intent of who we are as Americans.
Professor Freed, what do you think about this issue that's popped up, and the president talked about it with Maria Bartiromo, the interview coming up in a short time, about there not being a litmus test on Roe v. Wade?
Well, I think that we have to remember, as a Jewish philosopher, I say to all of my students that we are made in the image of God, and that therefore that God is inside of each and every one of us. And so, not having a litmus test on Roe versus Wade, what we need to do is recognize that the God is inside of each and every one of us.
Lila, 30 seconds for you. Obviously, as the only woman on the panel, I started this conversation talking about some Democrats saying that what's going to happen is Roe v. Wade will be overturned and that women are going to see the criminalization of their bodies. What do you say to that?
Roe v. Wade does no favor to women. It was poorly decided that refused to recognize life in the womb and pitted mothers against their children, and has created 60 million deaths by abortion in this country since, and the pain that women and fathers have experienced. So I think I look forward to an appointment by the president of a justice that would protect human rights in the womb and understand and see that life, the protection of human life, is something that our Constitution would uphold.
Lila, doctor, father, professor, we've got just about everybody included in here on this Sunday morning. We appreciate all of your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Meanwhile, another big story. The House Intel Chair Devin Nunes wants more than a dozen FBI and DOJ officials to testify about alleged FISA abuse. Our next guest says Robert Mueller needs to be in the hot seat as well. Tom Fitton will explain the details next. And it's the interview already getting a lot of attention. Everyone's talking about it before it's been completely unveiled. Maria Bartiromo one-on-one with the president. Before you see the full interview, she's going to be here first.
A possible government surveillance abuse during the 2016 election.
Our next guest has been all over the story from the start, and he argues that the special counsel, Robert Mueller, actually is the one who needs to be grilled on the Hill. So grilling on the Hill, I guess. It almost rhymes there. Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton joins us now to explain. Good morning, Tom.
Hey. Good morning, everyone. How are
you? Robert Mueller's been under attack from some of the president's allies, but you're somebody who gets the documents and does the digging and likes to back it up with facts. What's your case this morning?
You know, Mueller's operation is one of the most secretive I can remember. I've been doing this for 20 years, and it's difficult to get basic information about what he's been up to. And it's not just the normal special counsel operation. It was, in my view, corruptly conceived with a leak by James Comey to the New York Times that Comey admitted was designed to get a special counsel appointed. And now we know the Russia investigation had these corrupt origins with this FBI bias and Peter Strzok wanting to stop the president, this Clinton DNC dossier, key facts about which were withheld from the FISA court. And then on top of that, once it became public that Strzok had anti-Trump bias, Mueller removed him from his operation 4 months before the public knew about it. So I think it's fair to ask Mr. Mueller, what is he doing? Why is it? Are there any concerns he had about the way the investigation was set up? Were there any concerns he had about Strzok's bias?
Right.
And what about the bias of his own team? Why can't he find any registered Republicans to work on his team to reassure the American people that at least there's no bias there?
Yeah, a lot of good questions. And the frustration continues to heat up on the Hill, as you know, from members who are continuing to ask the DOJ and the FBI to hand over documents, especially those early days of this Russia investigation. Here's a statement that we got from the DOJ. They say that DOJ officials tell Fox News they have informed HPSCI and SSCI that their members and cleared staff can view the documents, and the DOJ recently provided to the Gang of Eight related to the Russia investigation. Nunes has been pushing for these docs to be provided to all HPSCI members instead of just the Gang of Eight.
That's the House committee, the permanent
Of course. So they're saying, look, we are giving more information over, but they're still upset about the timing. Why aren't we getting these documents faster, and why aren't more people able to see them?
Well, those are the people who can read them but can't talk about them. When you limit them to the Gang of Eight, it's presumptively, I would presume, classified. And when they're overly classifying information, it prevents that information from getting out to the American people. Look, the Justice Department and the FBI have a dog in the fight. They want to protect the Mueller investigation. I don't think they can be trusted to fairly evaluate whether documents are going to be released about how that investigation was set up, that targeting of President Trump illicitly during the Obama administration. So Congress is right to push back on the documents. You know, we're suing for these same documents in federal court, so maybe the federal courts will intervene. And I encourage always the president to step in and release the documents. He has the ultimate right and authority to get them all out there.
Tom Fitton, a story that continues to heat up.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tom.
A long road ahead, it
Thank
sounds
you,
like.
guys.
Thank you, Tom.
All right, Seattle police officers are leaving the force in big numbers, many of them reportedly citing frustrations over the city's politics. We'll talk to a frustrated officer next hour.
And he was a guest on this show so many times. Master Sergeant Mark Evans started an incredible program sending a slice of home to our troops, and he sadly passed away last year. His son, though, he is here, and he is telling us how he is keeping the Pizza for Patriots mission alive and well.
Who can't get behind that?
Yeah, right? Exactly. It's a great
Patriots
cause.
and pizza.
That's coming up next.